So we're starting a remodel, and this is what we're working with. All the demolition work is done right now. We'll be installing 4 new windows, 4 new doors. A big patio door will be going over here. 2 bathrooms, and we're working on currently framing in this door and then hanging drywall. So these are the plans that we have drawn up right now. So obviously 2 bathrooms. That's where the bed will be. Working on this door currently. Well, let's get it. We're diving into the first big phase of this remodel, framing in the new door openings. Most people think you just cut a hole and throw the frame in, but if you don't understand the load-bearing weight of the house, you're looking at a potential nightmare down the road. So a proper opening is assembled of a few parts working together. So first we set our king studs. These run the full height and keep the wall structure. Then we screw in our jack studs, also known as trimmers. These are extremely important. They don't go to the ceiling. They actually stop a little short and provide a solid seat for the header. Now the header acts as a bridge. Since this is a load-bearing wall, we use a doubled up 2x10, and that ensures the weight from the roof isn't pushing down on the door frame. If the header deflects, say, even an 1/8 inch, your door is probably going to bind and stick forever. So now you gotta make sure you're checking for level and square at every step. You can have the best materials in the world, but if your jacks aren't damn near perfect, when we go to finish, it won't be fun. We got the first door framed in. Now we're working on this opening over here. We're on to the second door of this remodel, and as you can see, the opening is a bit wider than the first one. So when you go wide, you can't just hope the drywall holds together, you actually have to build the bones per se to support that extra space. So the process here is basically identical to the first door, but with that extra width, we aren't doubling up the structural headers or king studs. Instead, we're focused on the lateral support. So what we're doing is we're adding studs on each side of the opening. It is a simple move, but it will make a massive difference in how solid the wall feels once the door, is actually swinging. So even though it's a repeat process, you still can't get lazy. You gotta still check to make sure every stud is level and square. So with a wider door, if your studs are even a fraction of an inch out of alignment, the gap can look huge once the trip goes on. So we're always aiming for perfection here. So when the finish goes on, it's not a nightmare. And honestly, this is the part of the job I actually enjoy. It's the repetition. So it's where you find your speed. And as a 20-year-old contractor starting to run sites, staying efficient without losing quality is how you actually make a profit moving forward. We're keeping the momentum high, but the standards higher. So this is door 2 framed, braced, and ready for drywall. We're hanging our first sheets of drywall today, and even though the Sparkies and HVAC guys aren't finished yet, we're getting a jump where we can. And this is the stage where the house finally starts to feel like a home and not just a skeleton. Now, what we like to do is things a little differently. We tend to use full sheets and cut out openings later. And honestly, it does lead to a bit more waste in the scrap pile, but trust me, there's a method to the madness. Every factory edge we keep is built joint. That means less work when we mud and tape. So I'd rather throw away $20 in a board than spend extra time, measuring or cutting or on a ladder feathering out a bad seam. Less mud and tape equals a flatter wall and a faster finish overall. And when you're running a business, you have to look at the total cost of the machine, also known as us, the labor, that is always more expensive than the rock. Since we're still waiting on the rough-ins for the electric and the HVAC, we're being surgical. And what I mean by that is we're hanging where we know the wall is dead, meaning no wires or ductwork are basically going to be run. So it is a bit of a puzzle, but that keeps the momentum moving forward. We're moving on to the first bathroom rough-in, and this is where the theory of contracting meets the reality of an old house. We're following the prints, but we've got a major curveball. So this entire section is an add-on from the old house, and that has racked over time. In a new build, you just pull your measurements and you go. But here, if the wall is perfectly plumb and the rest of the house is, leaning 2 inches, nothing's going to work. So we have to go with the old house. And this means we're turning up our new plates and matching the existing wall, so the finished work will potentially look seamless. You can see me pulling the layout of the exterior wall rather than just trusting, say, a laser. We're matching the rack of the house so that when we hang the door on runner baseboards that, will stay consistent. It sounds a bit counterintuitive, but building slightly out is the only way to make it look right in a house that's sold, if that makes sense. So this is what will separate a carpentry guy from who just, reads a tape. You have to anticipate the drywall and how the tiles are going to sit on these studs. So we basically got the bathrooms framed up. Got the drywall in. We got 2 Marvin windows. One will be going right here. This will be getting removed. Another Marvin window will be getting put right here. This window will be getting removed. This will be a shower. This will also be a shower. And we are taking a bigger window. I don't know the measurements, but it's getting set right here. And then the patio door will be getting put right here. So what we'll be working on right now is putting the 2 Marvin windows in and getting this out of here. Now we're moving on to the windows, and we're doing more than just a swap. We're completely changing how these rooms feel. With the 2 new bathrooms, each bathroom needs a window. So we're moving away from that single centered window in the existing wall and framing in 2 brand new openings on each side centered above the toilet. These bathrooms are small, so getting the window centered is very important because you will be able to see, let's say, even a ½ inch span of that window. The first step is probably the most nerve-wracking, so pulling out that original middle window and closing up that old hole. Surprisingly, these windows weren't flanged in, so with just a few hits with the hammer, you can see it came out pretty nicely. And once we got that handled, we're moving on to the layout. So marking out our 2 new openings, making sure they're perfectly symmetrical. In a remodel, like I said before, your eye will probably catch even a ½ inch mistake across that room instantly. So because we're creating new spots in that existing wall, we do have to be very surgical with the studs. So we're cutting out the old studs and headers and building 2 new entirely different structural assemblies. It's really a lot of back and forth with that level and the saw, but really it's the only way to make sure these new views don't compromise the house's strength, and that's very important. So it's a lot more than, let's say, a standard replacement, but with 2 different bathrooms, they each need their own light. It takes a house that felt closed in and to make it custom, and like at 20 years old, these are the kinds of designs that I love to bring into a project. So the roughed in is basically done, the headers are set, and the new glass is ready to drop. So the transformation is underway, and we have 1 more window to go. So we're getting ready to set the glass, but the most important part of the window itself is the gap around it. You never build your rough opening to its exact dimensions of the unit. and here's why. A window needs to be able to breathe. Between the expansion from the sun and the house naturally settling, the frame needs a little bit of play so it doesn't get crushed. We generally like to leave about a ½ inch of extra space so we have total control over the final position. You can see in the window we're working with shims, so they're not just being shoved in, they're used to ensure the opening is perfectly symmetrical on both sides. If you just slap it against one side of the stud, your interior trim is probably going to look lopsided. So we try to center them and put the unit in the hole so everything looks intentional from the inside. Again, you got to make sure they're plumb and level, so also checking for the cross corner square by adjusting the pressure of these shims. You can tweak the frame until it reveals are perfect. This ensures the sides are smooth and lock up lines where they're exactly supposed to be. So once the window is centered and squared, you tack it in from the outside and you use spray foam on the inside. That's how you get a window that's long lasting in framing to new views that are locked and loaded. Now we're moving on to the big window. You see a wide span, and most people expect to see a massive double upped header, but on this wall, we decided to do things a little differently, and for good reason. So we didn't double up the framing here because based on the load bearing path of this addition, we really didn't need to. And in contracting, most wood isn't always better. So if you overbuild where it isn't necessary, you're possibly losing insulation space and adding weight to the foundation for really no reason. Even without the double upped opening of this wall, it is a high stakes move. The structure is technically alive while we work, so we try to move fast, we try to stay precise, and get new studs in and the single ply header locked in before the house even has a chance to settle. It's all about being surgical, getting it in, securing the weight, and getting out. And at 20 years old, I've learned that the scary part of the job actually usually is the most rewarding. So you have to trust your layout, your math, your abilities, and that last stud snaps into place and the wall is rigid again, and that's where you know the house is ready for the next phase. The structure is solid, the opening is square, so when we were ready for glass, we were one step closer to getting this remodel locked in. Alright.
Oh, what a test.
Got the window done. Now I'm going to start framing up the bathroom there. Cash is going to take care of the patio door. We're at the finish line for the exterior openings. This is the final piece of the puzzle, this massive patio door. It's the biggest unit of the day. And honestly, it's the one that the homeowners are going to use the most, so we gotta get it perfect. So before the door even touches the opening, a lot of pros will just shim and screw, but on this patio door, we went straight to the subfloor and we glued it. We're running a very heavy based, high grade sealant across the entire opening. For two reasons. One, it creates the alright seal so you don't feel the draft under the door in January. Two, it bonds the door frame to the house. When people step on the threshold for the next 20 years, it'll feel rock solid. It won't flex, it won't squeak, and most importantly, there will be no water getting under that plate. Basically, it's a permanent bond for a permanent install, and that's exactly what we want. On a patio door, if your floor isn't dead level, the track is going to bind. So we cleaned out the subfloor very nicely, laying down a triple bead of sealant and making sure our flashing is tucked tight under so no Wisconsin snow will ever melt and find its way under this threshold. Like I talked about before, this house is racked and it is not level. So we couldn't just go to the existing studs, unfortunately. We had to rip out the old ones and re-level new ones. This unit was heavy, so we tried to move as fast as possible and set it and get it secured. Again, we didn't double up the header either because the structural load is already being carried by the adjacent wall. It's all about working with the house's existing strengths and getting the glass in before the temperature drops too. There's real satisfaction in watching that final door slide into place. At 20 years old, finishing on a day like this, 2 doors, 3 windows, proves that a small, focused screw can move mountains. We completely transformed the light and the flow of this house and this home in just a few hours. So with that being said, we got the exterior sealed, the house is locked, and we are officially dried in. That's a wrap on the openings. Stick around to the next video where we dive deeper into the bathroom remodel. Let's get it.